The bullet grazed her shoulder as Penelope Lang dove behind the overturned wagon, her breath coming in sharp gasps while blood seeped through her torn shirt sleeve. She had been tracking the rustlers for 3 days across the scorched Texas landscape, and now in the dusty outskirts of Sweetwater in the summer of 1878, she found herself pinned down with nowhere to run and nobody coming to help. The sun beat mercilessly overhead as she checked her revolver, counting the remaining bullets with practiced fingers. 4 shots left, 3 men circling her position. The mathematics of survival had never been in her favor, but then again, they never had been. She pressed her back against the splintered wood, ignoring the sharp pain radiating from her wounded shoulder. The rustlers had stolen her father's remaining cattle, the last thing she had left after he died 6 months ago from pneumonia. Her mother had passed when Penelope was just 8 years old, thrown from a spooked horse. Her older brother had been killed in a saloon fight in El Paso 3 years back. One by one, everyone who should have stood beside her had fallen away, leaving her alone on a struggling ranch with debts piling higher than tumbleweeds against a fence line. "Come on out, girl," a gruff voice called from somewhere to her left. "We do not want to hurt you. Just let us take the cattle and go on about your business." Penelope's jaw tightened. Those cattle represented her last chance to pay off the bank loan. Without them, she would lose the ranch entirely. She had fought too hard and too long to give up now, even if the odds were impossible. She risked a glance around the wagon's edge and immediately jerked back as another shot splintered the wood inches from her face. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands remained steady. Years of fighting alone had taught her to keep fear locked away where it could not interfere with survival. The sound of hoofbeats made her tense, expecting more trouble. Instead, a new voice rang out, deep and commanding with an edge of steel beneath the measured calm. "That is enough." Penelope peered around the wagon again and saw a tall cowboy on a dusty brown horse, positioned between her and the rustlers. He wore a dark hat pulled low, leather chaps over worn denim, and a gun belt that showed the kind of use that came from necessity rather than show. Even from her limited vantage point, she could see the way he sat his horse with easy confidence, like a man who had faced down trouble before and expected to do so again. "This is not your concern, stranger," one of the rustlers called out. "I am making it my concern," the cowboy replied. His hand rested casually near his holster, but Penelope recognized the stance of someone ready to draw. 3 armed men against 1 wounded woman. Those are not odds I can ride past. "She has been chasing us for days," another rustler protested. "We got a right to defend ourselves." "From what I can see, you are the ones doing the shooting while she is pinned down behind that wagon." The cowboy's voice hardened. "Now you have 2 choices. You can ride out of here right now and I will let you go, or you can try your luck against both of us. But I can promise you that will not end well for anyone." Penelope felt a strange flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the danger of the situation. Nobody had stood up for her in longer than she could remember. The sensation was so unfamiliar that she almost did not recognize it for what it was. Hope mixed with a bone-deep longing for exactly this, for someone to step between her and the endless fight. The rustlers must have seen something in the cowboy's face or stance that convinced them he was serious. After a tense moment of silence broken only by the hot wind rustling through the scrub brush, she heard the sound of horses turning and hoofbeats fading into the distance. The cowboy dismounted and approached the wagon slowly, his hands visible and unthreatening. "They are gone. You can come out now." Penelope emerged from behind the wagon, her revolver still in her hand though pointed at the ground. Now that she could see him properly, she noted details she had missed before. He stood well over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with strong features and eyes the color of warm whiskey that studied her with genuine concern. A few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, and dark hair curled slightly beneath the brim of his hat. "You are bleeding," he said, his gaze moving to her shoulder. "It is just a graze," Penelope replied, hating how her voice shook slightly now that the immediate danger had passed. She holstered her gun and pressed her hand against the wound. "I have had worse." Something flickered across his face at those words, an emotion she could not quite name. "I do not doubt it, but it still needs tending." He gestured toward his horse. "I have supplies in my saddlebag. Let me help you." Pride warred with practicality inside her. She had learned young not to depend on anyone, not to trust that help freely given would not come with strings attached. But the wound was still bleeding, and she was miles from town with the sun climbing toward its brutal midday peak. "Why did you help me?" she asked instead of answering. He met her eyes directly, and she felt the impact of that gaze like a physical thing. "Because you needed help, and because I know what it looks like when someone has been fighting alone for too long." The words hit her harder than any bullet could have. She stood there in the dust and heat, blood seeping between her fingers, while something inside her chest cracked open just a fraction. She wanted to argue, to insist she was fine on her own as she had always been, but the lie would not come. "My name is Tristan Xavier," he said into her silence. "I have been working cattle drives up from Mexico, heading north. Stopped in Sweetwater to resupply before pushing on to Kansas." "Penelope Lang," she replied finally. "Those men stole my cattle, my father's cattle, all I have left." Tristan's jaw tightened. "How many head?" 32. "Not much, but enough to make my loan payment and keep the ranch through winter." She swayed slightly, the blood loss and the heat and the adrenaline crash all hitting at once. His hand shot out to steady her, firm but gentle on her good arm. "First things first. Let me tend that wound, then we can talk about getting your cattle back." "We." The word escaped before she could stop it. "Yes, we." He guided her toward a patch of shade beneath a scraggly mesquite tree. "You are not fighting alone anymore, Penelope, not if I have anything to say about it." She should have protested, should have insisted she could handle things herself as she always had. But as she sank down into the shade and watched him retrieve medical supplies from his saddlebag with efficient, capable movements, she found herself unable to form the words. Instead, she studied him, trying to understand what kind of man would ride into someone else's trouble without being asked. Tristan knelt beside her and carefully examined the wound. His hands were steady and surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the injury with water from his canteen. She hissed at the sting but did not pull away. "You were lucky," he said. "Another inch to the left and it would have hit something vital." He pulled out a clean cloth and pressed it against the wound. "Hold this here while I prepare a bandage." She did as instructed, watching as he tore strips from another cloth with practiced ease. "You have done this before. More times than I care to count." He began wrapping the bandage around her shoulder, his touch careful and professional. "Cattle drives are not exactly safe work. And before that, I spent time as a deputy up in Colorado. You learn to patch up bullet holes or watch good men bleed out." "Why did you leave law work?" Penelope asked, wincing as he tightened the bandage. "Because the law is not always just." His voice carried a weight of old pain. "And because I got tired of watching people with power abuse those without it, while the badge on my chest meant I was supposed to look the other way." She understood that kind of disillusionment. She had watched her father struggle under the weight of debts he could never quite pay off, had seen how the bank and the big ranchers always seemed to have the law on their side while small operators like her family barely survived. So, you became a cowboy. I became free, he corrected, tying off the bandage. Out on the trail, the only law that matters is the one you carry in your holster and your heart. A man makes his own choices, lives with his own consequences. He sat back on his heels and studied her face. How does that feel? Better. Thank you. She flexed her shoulder experimentally. The bleeding had stopped and the pain had settled into a dull throb. I need to go after those rustlers, track them before the trail goes cold. In your condition, you would be dead within a day. He stood and offered her his hand. You need rest, food, and time for that wound to start healing. I do not have time, Penelope said, but she took his hand anyway and let him pull her to her feet. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her, and she quickly released his fingers. Every hour they get further away. Every hour I am closer to losing everything. Tristan was quiet for a moment, his eyes searching hers. Then he said something that changed everything. I will help you track them. We will get your cattle back together. But first, you are going to let me take you back to town, get you a proper meal and at least a few hours of rest. Then we ride out at first light tomorrow when you have your strength back and we can track them properly. Why would you do that? Penelope demanded, frustration and exhaustion making her voice sharp. You do not know me. This is not your fight. It is my fight now, he replied simply, because I am making it my fight. You have been carrying everything alone for too long, Penelope. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you hold yourself like you are always braced for the next blow. He took a step closer, his presence solid and reassuring in a way that made her throat tight. I do not know what all you have been through, but I know you do not have to face what comes next by yourself. Not anymore. She wanted to argue, to push him away, to retreat behind the walls she had built so carefully over the years. But standing there in the Texas heat with her shoulder throbbing and her heart hammering, she found herself unable to move. The offer of help, of partnership, of someone standing beside her rather than leaving her to fight alone, was more tempting than anything she had ever encountered. I do not need charity, she managed finally. Good, because I am not offering any. He walked over to his horse and gathered the reins. I am offering partnership. You know this land, you know those cattle, and you have every right to get back what is yours. I have the skills and the gun to help make that happen. Together we have a real chance. Alone, you are just going to get yourself killed, and those rustlers will sell your cattle in Mexico without consequence. The brutal honesty of his words cut through her pride. He was right, much as she hated to admit it. She had been running on stubbornness and desperation, and neither of those would be enough against 3 armed men who had already proven willing to shoot at her. All right, she said quietly. We do this together. Something lit up in Tristan's eyes, a warmth that made her stomach flip. Good. Now let me give you a ride back to Sweetwater. Your horse run off, tied her about a mile back when I started tracking on foot. Penelope gestured vaguely southwest. Figured I could get closer without being spotted if I was not on horseback. Smart thinking. He swung up into his saddle and then reached down to help her up behind him. We will collect her on the way. Penelope hesitated only briefly before taking his hand and letting him pull her up. She settled behind him, acutely aware of the solid warmth of his back, the way she had to hold onto his waist to keep her balance. It had been so long since she had been this close to anyone that the simple human contact felt overwhelming. They rode in silence for a while, the horse's steady gait eating up the distance. The sun hammered down on them, but Penelope barely noticed. Her mind was too busy trying to process everything that had happened in the last hour. She had woken up this morning alone as always, determined to face down the rustlers even if it killed her. Now she had a bullet wound, a bandage applied by a stranger's careful hands, and a promise of help that she did not quite know how to accept. "How long have you been running your ranch alone?" Tristan asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "6 months since my father died. 3 years before that since my brother was killed." She was surprised to hear herself answer honestly. Usually she kept such information close. "My mother died when I was young. It has been just me for a while now." "That is a hell of a burden for one person to carry." "I manage." "I am sure you do." His voice held respect rather than pity, which somehow made it easier to bear. "But managing and thriving are 2 different things. You should not have to just survive, Penelope. You should be able to build something, to have a future worth looking forward to." The words stirred something deep inside her, a longing she had buried beneath the daily struggle for survival. When had she last thought about the future as anything other than a series of obstacles to overcome? When had she last let herself imagine something beyond just making it through another day, another season, another loan payment? "There is my horse," she said instead of responding, pointing toward where she had tied the mare to a sturdy bush. Tristan guided his mount over and waited while Penelope slid down, biting back a gasp as the movement jarred her wounded shoulder. She untied her horse, a sturdy bay mare named Copper, and mounted with more difficulty than she wanted to admit. The injury was taking more out of her than she had realized. "You holding up all right?" Tristan asked, his perceptive gaze missing nothing. "I will make it to town," she replied, which was not quite an answer but was all she could manage. They rode side by side toward Sweetwater, which shimmered in the heat distance like a mirage. The town was not much to look at, just a handful of buildings clustered along the main road with the creek that gave it its name running along the southern edge. But it was home, or as close to home as anywhere had ever been for Penelope. As they entered town, she was aware of curious glances from the few people brave enough to be outside in the midday heat. Penelope Lang riding in wounded with a strange cowboy at her side would be fuel for gossip for weeks. She could already hear the whispers, the speculation, the judgment. Small towns like Sweetwater did not look kindly on women who lived alone and caused trouble. Tristan seemed oblivious to the attention, his focus entirely on getting Penelope settled. He stopped outside the boarding house run by Martha Chen, a stern but fair widow who kept the cleanest rooms in town. "Wait here," he said, dismounting quickly. "I will get you a room." "I have a ranch to get back to," Penelope protested, but even as she said it, she swayed in the saddle. "You have a wound that needs rest and proper care," Tristan countered. "Your ranch will still be there tomorrow. Right now, you need to take care of yourself." Before she could argue further, he had disappeared inside. Penelope sat on Copper, too tired to dismount or protest anymore. She hated feeling weak, hated needing help, hated the way her body was betraying her with its insistence on rest and recovery. Tristan emerged a few minutes later with Martha Chen herself, who took one look at Penelope's pale face and bloody bandage and clucked her tongue disapprovingly. "Get down from there, girl," Martha ordered in her no-nonsense way. "You look like death warmed over. Inside with you." Tristan helped Penelope dismount, his hands steady on her waist, and guided her into the boarding house. The cool interior was a blessed relief after the brutal heat outside. Martha led them to a small but clean room on the ground floor and pointed at the bed. "Sit. I will bring water and proper medical supplies." She fixed Tristan with a stern look. "You decent with doctoring, or are you just going to stand there looking worried?" "I can handle basic field medicine," Tristan replied, "but I will defer to your expertise." Martha's expression softened slightly. "Good answer. I will be right back." When she left, Penelope finally allowed herself to sink onto the edge of the bed. The room spun slightly and she closed her eyes. "When did you last eat?" Tristan asked. She had to think about it. "Yesterday morning, I think, maybe the night before, Penelope." His voice held gentle exasperation. "No wonder you are about to fall over." "I was tracking rustlers," she said defensively. "I did not exactly have time to stop for meals. Which is exactly why you need help." He crouched in front of her so they were at eye level. "You cannot take care of your ranch or anything else if you run yourself into the ground." She met his eyes, those warm, whiskey-colored eyes that looked at her with something she had not seen in far too long. Genuine care. Not pity, not judgment, but real concern for her well-being. It made her chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with her injury. "I am not used to this," she admitted quietly. "Used to what? Someone caring, someone helping." She looked away, uncomfortable with the vulnerability in her own words. "It has been a long time." Tristan's hand came to rest gently on her knee, a simple gesture of comfort. "You better get used to it, because I meant what I said out there. You are not fighting alone anymore." Martha returned before Penelope could respond, carrying a basin of water, clean cloths, and an impressive array of medical supplies. She shooed Tristan back and proceeded to unwrap his bandage, examine the wound with efficient, gentle hands, and clean it properly. "You did a decent job for field work," Martha told Tristan grudgingly, "but this needs proper stitching. Hold her steady." Penelope gritted her teeth as Martha cleaned the wound more thoroughly and then began stitching. Tristan moved to sit beside her on the bed, his arm coming around her shoulders to brace her. She found herself leaning into his solid presence, drawing strength from him as Martha worked. "So who are you?" Martha asked Tristan as she stitched. "I have not seen you in Sweetwater before." "Tristan Xavier. I am passing through on my way north with a cattle drive. Had some time before we push on, so I thought I would help Miss Lang recover her stolen cattle." Martha's eyebrows rose. "Is that so? Well, I hope you have more luck than anyone else who has tried to help this stubborn girl. She has been going it alone so long I think she has forgotten how to accept assistance." "I have not forgotten," Penelope muttered. "I just learned not to count on it." "There is a difference between counting on help and accepting it when it is offered," Martha said, tying off the last stitch. "There. That should heal properly if you rest and keep it clean, which means no riding out after rustlers for at least a day or two." "I cannot wait that long," Penelope started to protest, but both Martha and Tristan fixed her with identical stern looks that made her fall silent. "You will wait," Martha said firmly. "Or that wound will open up, get infected, and kill you. Then who will run your ranch?" It was hard to argue with that logic. Penelope slumped in defeat, which only made her shoulder throb worse. "Good." Martha finished bandaging the wound with clean cloth and then stood. "I will bring you some food. You eat every bite, hear me, and then you sleep. Doctor's orders." After Martha left, Penelope became acutely aware of Tristan still sitting beside her, his arm still around her shoulders. The contact felt both foreign and right, like something she had been missing without realizing it. "I should let you rest," Tristan said, but he did not move. "Tell me about yourself," Penelope heard herself say. "If we are going to be partners in this, I should know something about the man I am trusting." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Fair enough. What do you want to know? Everything." The word came out more intense than she intended, but she did not take it back. Tristan was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "I was born in Colorado, small mining town called Silver Creek. My father was a miner, my mother took in laundry. I had 2 younger sisters." He paused and something painful flickered across his face. "There was a mine collapse when I was 17. My father died along with 30 other men. My mother could not handle the grief. She died 6 months later, just gave up. And your sisters? Penelope asked softly. I raised them as best I could for a couple years, took whatever work I could find. When they were old enough, they went east to live with our aunt in St. Louis. Got married to decent men, have families now. There was warmth in his voice when he spoke of them, but also sadness. I send them money when I can, visit when I am able, but I did not fit in their new lives. Too rough, too wild. So I became a deputy, then a cowboy, been moving ever since. You gave up your home for them, Penelope observed. They were worth it. Family is worth any sacrifice. His arm tightened slightly around her shoulders. But I understand what it is like to lose everyone who is supposed to stand beside you, to have to figure out how to survive when the world takes away your foundation. Is that why you helped me? Because you saw yourself in my situation? Partly. He turned to look at her directly, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. But also because, when I saw you behind that wagon, blood on your shoulder and defiance in your eyes, refusing to give up even though you were outnumbered and outgunned, something inside me responded. I saw strength and courage and a fighter's heart, and I thought, here is someone worth riding beside. Heat that had nothing to do with fever flooded through Penelope. Nobody had ever looked at her the way Tristan was looking at her now, like she was something precious and powerful all at once. Like she mattered beyond what she could do or provide. I do not know how to do this, she whispered. Do what? Trust someone. Let someone help. Be anything other than alone. Then we will figure it out together, Tristan replied, his voice gentle but certain. One step at a time. Starting with you eating the food Martha brings and getting some rest. Can you do that? She nodded, not trusting her voice. The walls she had built so carefully around her heart were cracking, and she was not sure whether to be terrified or relieved. Martha returned with a tray laden with beef stew, fresh bread, and water. The smell made Penelope's stomach clench with sudden hunger. She had not realized how empty she was until food was placed in front of her. Tristan finally released her and stood. I will leave you to eat and rest. I am going to stable our horses and see what I can learn about those rustlers. Find out if anyone in town knows where they might be headed. You will come back. The question escaped before Penelope could stop it, revealing more vulnerability than she intended. His expression softened. I will come back, I promise. Get some rest, Penelope. I will check on you in a few hours. After he left, Penelope ate mechanically, barely tasting the food despite her hunger. Her mind was spinning with everything that had happened, with the sudden presence of Tristan Xavier in her life, with the unfamiliar sensation of not being completely alone against the world. She finished eating and lay back on the bed, intending to rest for just a few minutes. But exhaustion dragged her down into sleep before she could fight it. Her last conscious thought a memory of warm, whisky eyes looking at her like she was worth saving. When Penelope woke, the light slanting through the window told her it was late afternoon. She sat up carefully, testing her shoulder. It ached but did not feel worse, which she counted as a victory. Her stomach was pleasantly full, and despite the circumstances, she felt more rested than she had in months. A soft knock at the door made her tense, but then Tristan's voice came through the wood. Penelope, are you awake? Come in, she called. He entered carrying another tray, this one with coffee and some kind of cake. Martha insisted you needed to eat again when you woke. That woman is a force of nature. She has been good to me over the years, Penelope admitted. One of the few people in this town who does not judge me for running the ranch alone. Tristan set the tray on the small table by the window and settled into the chair beside it. Why would they judge you for that? Because I am a woman doing work they think I have no business doing. Because I wear pants and carry a gun and do not apologize for either. Because I do not fit into their neat little boxes of what a proper lady should be. She heard the bitterness in her own voice and hated it, but could not quite suppress it. Their loss, Tristan said simply. Anyone with eyes can see you are exactly who you need to be to survive out here. That takes more courage than most of them will ever have. The casual acceptance in his words made her chest tight. She stood and moved to the table, pouring herself coffee and taking a sip. The bitter brew was exactly what she needed. "What did you learn about the rustlers?" she asked, forcing herself to focus on practical matters. "Not much that is encouraging," Tristan admitted. "They are part of a larger gang that has been operating along the border for the past year. They steal cattle and horses from ranches on both sides, drive them across into Mexico, and sell them to buyers who do not ask questions. By the time anyone organizes to go after them, they are long gone. So my cattle are probably already in Mexico, probably, but that does not mean we cannot get them back." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I have been thinking about this. The gang has to have a regular crossing point and holding area where they collect stolen livestock before driving them south. If we can find that, we might be able to intercept your cattle before they are sold and scattered." Hope flickered in Penelope's chest. "Do you know where this holding area might be? I have some ideas. There are only so many places along the border near here where you can move a herd without attracting attention. And I spent time down in this area a few years back, worked some drives. I know the terrain." He paused. "But it will be dangerous. These men do not take kindly to having their operations interrupted." "I do not care about danger," Penelope said flatly. "I care about getting my cattle back and saving my ranch." "I figured you would say that." Something that might have been pride gleamed in his eyes. "So here is what I propose. We leave at dawn tomorrow, give your shoulder another night to heal. We ride southwest toward the border, check the likely crossing points. When we find them, we assess the situation and figure out the best way to get your cattle back without getting ourselves killed in the process. That is not much of a plan. It is the best plan we have with limited information." He met her eyes steadily. "Unless you have a better idea." Penelope considered for a moment, then shook her head. "No, you are right. We need to find them first, then figure out what to do." She took another sip of coffee. "I appreciate you doing this, Tristan. I know you have your own responsibilities, your own life to get back to." "My responsibilities can wait a few days. And as for my life, right now helping you feels like exactly where I am supposed to be." The words were simple, but carried a weight that made her heart beat faster. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning their route, with Penelope sharing her knowledge of the local terrain and Tristan contributing his experience tracking cattle thieves. It felt strange to work with someone rather than alone, to have her ideas considered and built upon rather than just executing everything herself. Strange, but also remarkably good. As evening fell, Martha brought dinner for both of them, giving Tristan a knowing look that made Penelope's cheeks heat. After they ate, Tristan stood to leave, but Penelope found herself reluctant to let him go. "Will you stay a while?" she asked. "Just to talk. I have not had a real conversation with anyone in longer than I can remember." He settled back into the chair with a smile. "I would like that." They talked deep into the night, sharing stories from their pasts, dreams they had given up on and ones they still held secretly. Penelope found herself opening up in ways she never had before, revealing fears and hopes she had never spoken aloud. Tristan listened with genuine interest, occasionally sharing his own experiences, creating a connection that felt both fragile and surprisingly strong. "What would you do if you did not have to worry about money or the ranch?" Tristan asked at one point. "If you could do anything at all, Penelope was quiet for a long moment, genuinely considering the question. I think I would still run the ranch, but I would do it differently. I would have a herd large enough to be profitable without breaking my back every day. I would hire help so I did not have to do everything alone. Maybe I would even let myself have a life beyond just work. She glanced at him. What about you? I would have my own land. Not a huge spread, just enough to run some cattle and horses, be my own boss. A good house, strong and well built, space for a family. His eyes met hers. Someone to share it all with, so I am not just surviving but actually living. The longing in his voice resonated with something deep in Penelope's chest. How long had she been merely surviving, telling herself that was enough because anything more seemed impossible? When had she stopped believing she deserved more than endless struggle? That sounds nice, she said softly. It does not it? He stood and stretched. But right now, we both need sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day of riding. Penelope nodded reluctantly. She did not want him to leave, did not want to be alone again, even for the few hours until dawn, but she knew he was right. At the door, Tristan paused and looked back at her. Penelope, I am glad I rode into your fight today. So am I, she admitted. More than I can say. His smile was warm enough to melt something frozen inside her. Good night, I will see you at dawn. After he left, Penelope lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind too active for sleep. Something fundamental had shifted in her world today. For the first time in years, she was not facing her problems alone. More than that, she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she did not have to be alone at all. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Dawn came too quickly and not fast enough. Penelope woke before the sun, her shoulders stiff but manageable. She dressed carefully in her most practical clothes, pants and a shirt that would not restrict her movement, and checked her gun with automatic thoroughness. Tristan was waiting outside with both horses saddled and ready. He looked her over critically when she emerged. How is the shoulder? Fine, she said, which was not quite true but not entirely a lie either. Penelope. It hurts, but I can ride and I can shoot. That is all that matters. She took Copper's reins and mounted, trying not to wince at the pull on her stitches. Tristan looked like he wanted to argue but apparently thought better of it. He swung into his own saddle, and they rode out of Sweetwater as the sun painted the eastern sky in shades of gold and pink. They headed southwest across the harsh Texas landscape, following cattle trails and wagon roads that grew increasingly faint as they moved toward the border. The land was unforgiving here, all scrub brush and rocks and dust with the sun beating down mercilessly even in the early morning. Tell me about your ranch, Tristan said as they rode side by side. Penelope was grateful for the distraction from the monotonous landscape and the dull throb in her shoulder. It is not much to look at. The house needs work, the barn needs patching, and the fences are barely standing in places. But it was my father's and his father's before that. 3 generations of Langs have worked that land. She paused. I am the last one. If I lose it, that is the end of everything my family built. You will not lose it, Tristan said with quiet certainty. We will get your cattle back. And if we cannot, if they are already sold, scattered across Mexico, she had to voice the fear. Then we figure out another way. You still have the land itself, right? The bank has not foreclosed yet. I have until the end of September to make the payment. 6 more weeks. Then we have time. He was quiet for a moment. How much do you need? The question surprised her. Why? Because maybe there is another way to raise the money if the cattle are gone. I have some savings from the trail drives. It is not much, but it might help. Penelope pulled Copper to a stop, staring at him. You would loan me money. We just met yesterday. Tristan stopped his horse as well and turned to face her. Yes, I would, And it would not be a loan, it would be an investment. In what? In you, in your ranch, in a future that does not have to be faced alone. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. I know we just met, Penelope. I know this does not make logical sense. But sometimes the most important things do not follow logic. They follow what you know in your gut to be right. And my gut tells me that helping you, standing beside you, is exactly what I am supposed to be doing. Her throat was tight with emotions she could not name. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything right now. Let us focus on finding your cattle first. But I wanted you to know that whatever happens, you have options. You are not backed into a corner anymore. They rode on in silence for a while, but it was a comfortable silence now, charged with possibility. Penelope kept stealing glances at Tristan, trying to understand what she had done to deserve someone like him riding into her life. She had spent so long believing she had to face everything alone that the concept of genuine partnership was still foreign and overwhelming. By midday, they had covered substantial ground, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and take water from their canteens. The landscape grew even more desolate as they approached the border region, with rocky outcrops and dry creek beds replacing what little vegetation existed closer to town. There, Tristan said suddenly, pointing toward a narrow canyon cutting between two ridges. That would be a good place to hold cattle before crossing. Natural walls, only one way in or out, easy to guard. They guided their horses carefully toward the canyon, both of them alert for any sign of the rustlers. As they got closer, Penelope caught the faint sound of cattle lowing. They are here, she breathed, hope and fear warring in her chest. Tristan dismounted and moved forward on foot, gesturing for Penelope to follow. They crept to the edge of the canyon and peered down into the natural basin below. Her heart leaped when she saw her cattle, still bearing her father's brand, mixed in with other livestock from various ranches. 3 men were visible, sitting around a small fire and talking casually. "That is them," Penelope whispered, her hand automatically moving toward her gun. Tristan grabbed her wrist gently but firmly. "Wait, we need to think this through. There might be more men we cannot see, and even if there is not, 3 against 2 are not great odds, especially with you injured. So what do you suggest?" She hated the delay but recognized the wisdom in his caution. "We watch them for a while, figure out their pattern. See if they are waiting for more cattle, or if they are planning to move this group soon. Then we come up with a plan that does not get us both killed." They spent the next several hours observing from their hidden vantage point. Penelope's shoulder throbbed in protest of the cramped position, but she ignored it, focusing on memorizing every detail of the rustlers' camp. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, 2 more men rode in, confirming that there were at least 5 rustlers total. "They are planning to move the cattle at dawn tomorrow," Tristan murmured, having overheard snatches of conversation. "Push them across the border before anyone can organize to stop them." "Then we have to act tonight," Penelope said. "Agreed, but we need to be smart about it." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Here is what I propose. We wait until full dark when they are asleep or at least less alert. I will slip down and create a distraction on the far side of their camp, something to draw them away from the cattle. While they are distracted, you cut out your herd and start driving them north. I will catch up with you once I have lost the rustlers." "That is too dangerous," Penelope protested. "You will be outnumbered 5-1. But I will have the element of surprise, the cover of darkness, and they will be expecting an attack on the cattle, not a distraction. I have better odds than it sounds." He met her eyes. "Trust me, Penelope, I know what I am doing." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist they find another way, but she could see the logic in his plan. And more than that, she could see the determination in his face. He was going to do this whether she agreed or not. "All right," she said finally. "But if you are not back by dawn, I am coming to find you." "Fair enough." He reached out and squeezed her hand briefly. "This is going to work. By tomorrow night you will have your cattle back and your ranch will be safe." They retreated further from the canyon edge and made a cold camp, not daring to light a fire that might give away their position. As darkness fell, Penelope found her nerves stretched taut with anticipation and fear. Not fear for herself, but fear for Tristan. The thought of something happening to him made her chest constrict in a way that had nothing to do with her injury. "You are worried about me," Tristan observed, his voice quiet in the darkness. "Of course I am worried," Penelope replied. "You are putting yourself in danger for my cattle. That makes me responsible if something happens to you. You are not responsible for my choices." He moved closer so she could see his face in the starlight. "I am doing this because I want to, because it is the right thing to do, but also because I care what happens to you, Penelope. More than I probably should after just 2 days." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I care what happens to you too, more than I thought possible after convincing myself for years that caring about anyone was just inviting more loss and pain." "Caring about someone always carries the risk of loss," Tristan said softly. "But the alternative is spending your whole life alone, protected but empty. I tried that after my parents died. It did not make me stronger, it just made me hollow. Then yesterday I saw you fighting for what was yours with everything you had, and something inside me woke up. I do not want to be alone anymore, Penelope, and I do not think you do either." "I do not," she admitted, the words catching in her throat, "but I do not know how to be anything else." "Then we learn together." He reached up and gently cupped her face with his hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "One day at a time, one choice at a time, starting with tonight, with getting your cattle back, with proving that you do not have to fight alone anymore." The touch of his hand on her face was gentle and grounding. Before she could talk herself out of it, Penelope leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief and tentative, neither of them quite sure how to navigate this connection growing between them. But it was also sweet and full of promise, a physical acknowledgement of the bond forming in the space of shared danger and vulnerability. When they pulled apart, Tristan rested his forehead against hers. "When this is over," he said quietly, "when your cattle are safe and your ranch is secure, I want to have a real conversation about what happens next, because I find myself not wanting to ride on to Kansas. I find myself wanting to stay right here with you." "I would like that," Penelope whispered. "I would like that very much." They held each other for a moment longer, drawing strength from the contact. Then Tristan pulled back, his expression shifting to one of focused determination. "It is time," he said. "Remember the plan. When you hear the commotion, you move fast. Cut your cattle out and drive them north. Do not wait for me, do not look back. Just get them to safety, I will find you." "Be careful," Penelope said, hating how helpless she felt sending him into danger alone. "Always." He checked his guns, adjusted his hat, and then slipped away into the darkness like a shadow. Penelope made her way carefully to where they had left the horses, her heart in her throat. She mounted Copper and waited in agonizing silence, every nerve strung tight. Minutes stretched like hours. Then suddenly, the night erupted with sound. Gunshots, shouting, the thunder of hooves. She could see confusion in the rustlers' camp below as they scrambled to respond to whatever Tristan had done on the far side. This was her chance. Penelope urged Copper forward, racing into the canyon toward her cattle. The animals were already spooked by the noise, milling nervously. She positioned herself behind them and started driving them toward the canyon exit, using calls and movements her father had taught her years ago. The cattle responded, pushing forward in a growing wave. More gunshots echoed behind her, making her flinch, but she kept her focus on the cattle. Get them to safety. Trust Tristan to take care of himself. She repeated it like a prayer as she drove the herd north into the darkness. It was hard, exhausting work, made harder by her injured shoulder and the darkness and the fear eating at her insides. But Penelope pushed through, drawing on reserves of strength she had not known she possessed. The cattle moved steadily northward, putting distance between themselves and the rustlers. She had been driving them for perhaps an hour when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Penelope's hand flew to her gun, but then Tristan emerged from the darkness, his horse lathered but intact, his face splitting into a wide grin. "You did it," he called, pulling alongside her. "I will help you drive them. We need to put as much distance as possible between us and them before they can regroup and follow." Relief flooded through Penelope so intensely it made her dizzy. "Are you hurt?" "Not a scratch. They were too busy chasing shadows to get a bead on me." He laughed, the sound filled with exhilaration. "Come on, let us get these cattle home." They drove through the remainder of the night, taking turns resting briefly while the other kept the herd moving. As dawn broke, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Penelope could see familiar landmarks. They were only a few miles from her ranch. "We did it," she said, the reality finally sinking in. "We actually did it." "You did it," Tristan corrected. "I just helped." "No," Penelope said firmly. "We did it together. I could not have done this alone." By the time they reached her ranch, Penelope was swaying in the saddle from exhaustion and pain, her shoulders screaming in protest. But her heart was full as she watched her cattle settle into the familiar pasture. These animals represented her future, her family's legacy, everything she had been fighting for. Tristan helped her dismount and steadied her when she stumbled. "Let us get you inside. You need rest, and those stitches need checking." The ranch house was small and worn, much as she had described, but it was hers. Penelope unlocked the door and they stepped into the main room, which served as kitchen and living space combined. Everything was exactly as she had left it, sparse but clean. "Sit," Tristan ordered gently, guiding her to one of the two chairs at the small table. He found her medical supplies and carefully examined her shoulder. "The stitches held, but you are going to have some serious bruising. You pushed yourself too hard." "It was worth it," Penelope said. "The cattle are home. The ranch is saved." "For now," Tristan agreed. "But you still need to make that loan payment, and you will need help getting these cattle to market when the time comes." "I will figure something out. I always do." But even as she said it, the exhaustion of the past few days crashed over her. She had the cattle back, but so many other problems remained. The constant struggle felt endless. Tristan knelt in front of her chair, taking both her hands in his. "Penelope, listen to me. You do not have to figure it out alone anymore. I meant what I said before. I want to stay. I want to help you run this ranch, build it into something that does not break your back every day. I want to be your partner in this." "Why?" she asked, tears pricking at her eyes. "Why would you give up your own plans for me?" "Because somewhere between pulling you out from behind that wagon and watching you drive your cattle home with blood seeping through your bandage and pure determination on your face, I fell in love with you." The words were simple and devastating. "I know it is fast. I know it does not make sense. But when you find the person you are supposed to stand beside for the rest of your life, you do not let them go just because the timing is inconvenient." Penelope's breath caught. "You love me." "Yes." There was no hesitation, no doubt in his voice. "I love your strength, your courage, your refusal to give up even when everything is stacked against you. I love how you opened up to me despite years of protecting yourself. I love the woman who fights for what is hers, and the woman who let me see her vulnerability. I love you, Penelope Lang, and I am not going anywhere unless you tell me to go." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, they were tears of happiness rather than despair. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not think I could feel this way. I did not think I would ever meet someone who would stand beside me, rather than expect me to follow behind or leave me to manage alone. But then, you rode into my life and everything changed." Tristan pulled her into his arms, careful of her injured shoulder, and held her while she cried out years of loneliness and struggle and fear. When the tears finally subsided, he tipped her face up and kissed her properly. A kiss full of promise and passion and the beginning of something new. "Marry me," he said when they finally broke apart. "I know it is sudden, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Marry me and let me spend the rest of my days proving that you never have to fight alone again." "Yes," Penelope said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." The next weeks were a blur of activity and joy such as Penelope had never experienced. Tristan sent word to the cattle drive that he would not be continuing north, that he had found something more important in Texas. He helped Penelope repair the ranch, his strength and skill making short work of projects that had seemed insurmountable when she faced them alone. They were married in late August in Sweetwater, a simple ceremony with Martha Chen and a few other townspeople as witnesses. Penelope wore a simple dress borrowed from Martha, but she felt beautiful under Tristan's adoring gaze. When he slipped a ring on her finger, a plain gold band that represented everything he had saved from years of trail work, she knew she held something more precious than all the cattle in Texas. Their wedding night in the newly repaired ranch house was tender and passionate, a physical joining that sealed what their hearts had already claimed. Tristan worshipped her body with gentle hands and burning kisses, making her feel cherished and desired in ways she had never imagined. Afterward, lying in his arms in the bed they would share for the rest of their lives, Penelope finally understood what it meant to have a true partner. "I used to think strength meant never needing anyone," she told him in the darkness. "I thought asking for help was weakness. And now?" Tristan asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Now I know real strength is letting someone stand beside you, is building something together that neither of you could build alone." She turned to look at him. "You make me stronger, Tristan. Not because you fight my battles for me, but because you give me the support to fight them better." "That goes both ways," he replied. "You have given me something I did not even know I was missing. A home, a purpose, someone to build a future with. I spent years drifting, and I did not realize how hollow that made me until I found you." They made the loan payment at the end of September with money from selling some of the recovered cattle. The banker's surprise at seeing Penelope walk in with her new husband at her side and payment in full was almost comical. Over the following months, they worked together to build the ranch into something more profitable and sustainable. Tristan's experience with cattle and his network of contacts from the trail drives opened new markets for their stock. By the spring of 1879, the ranch was thriving in ways it had not in years. They had hired 2 hands to help with the work, young cowboys looking for steady employment who appreciated Tristan's fair management and Penelope's no-nonsense approach. The house had been expanded with an additional bedroom and a proper kitchen. The barn was sound, the fences were strong, and the herd was growing, but the greatest change was in Penelope herself. The constant tension she had carried for years had eased. She smiled more, laughed freely, and no longer felt the weight of the world entirely on her shoulders. Having Tristan beside her did not make the work of ranching any less hard, but it made it bearable. More than that, it made it a joy. One evening in late May, as they sat on the new porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Penelope made an announcement that would change everything again. "I am pregnant," she said simply. Tristan's head whipped around, his eyes wide. "What? Pregnant? With child?" "We are going to have a baby." She smiled at his shocked expression. "I suspected for a few weeks, but I wanted to be sure before I told you." Joy exploded across his face. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Are you happy about it?" Terrified, Penelope admitted. "But yes, incredibly happy. I never thought I would have this, Tristan. A husband who loves me, a thriving ranch, and now a child. A year ago I was fighting alone just to survive another day. Now I have everything I did not dare to dream about." "You deserve all of it," he said fiercely. "You deserve happiness and peace and a full life. And our child is going to grow up knowing they have parents who love them and each other, who will always stand together no matter what challenges come." The baby, a girl they named Rebecca after Tristan's mother, was born in January of 1880 on a cold but clear winter day. Martha Chen served as midwife, and when she placed the squalling infant in Penelope's arms, the new mother felt a surge of love so powerful it took her breath away. Tristan sat beside the bed, his arm around Penelope, his eyes never leaving their daughter's tiny face. "She is perfect," he whispered. "She is ours," Penelope replied, which meant the same thing. Watching Tristan with their daughter over the following months filled Penelope with a contentment she had not known was possible. He was gentle and patient, changing diapers and walking the floor with Rebecca when she fussed, singing soft songs in a voice meant only for their daughter's ears. At night, they would lie together with the baby between them, marveling at the life they had created. The ranch continued to prosper. Tristan proved to be not just a capable rancher but a shrewd businessman, negotiating good prices for their cattle and investing wisely in improvements. By Rebecca's first birthday, they had paid off the remaining debt on the ranch and had money in the bank for the first time in Penelope's memory. But more important than the financial success was the life they had built together. The ranch that had once been Penelope's burden to carry alone was now their shared project, a labor of love they approached as partners. They made decisions together, divided the work according to their strengths, and supported each other through the inevitable setbacks and challenges. One afternoon in the spring of 1881, Penelope found Tristan in the barn repairing tack, while Rebecca played nearby with wooden blocks he had carved for her. She stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her family, overwhelmed by gratitude for the strange twist of fate that had brought this man into her life. Tristan looked up and caught her watching. "What are you thinking about?" "About how different everything is from 2 years ago," Penelope said, moving to sit beside him. "About how I was ready to die in that shootout with the rustlers because I could not see any other way forward. And then you rode up and everything changed." "I was just in the right place at the right time," Tristan said. "No, you were exactly where you were supposed to be." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "You did not just help me get my cattle back, Tristan. You gave me my life back. You showed me that I did not have to spend every day fighting alone, that there was another way to live." "You did the same for me," he replied. "I was drifting, going through the motions of living without anything to anchor me. Then I met a fierce, beautiful woman who was fighting for everything she had with every ounce of strength she possessed, and I knew I had found my home." Rebecca toddled over and tugged on Tristan's leg, demanding attention. He scooped her up and settled her in his lap, and Penelope leaned against his shoulder, the three of them together in the comfortable silence of family. As the years passed, the ranch grew into one of the most respected operations in that part of Texas. Tristan's reputation for fair dealing and Penelope's skills in managing the land brought them success and the respect of their neighbors. They had two more children, a boy they named Thomas in 1882 and another girl, Sarah, in 1884. The house expanded to accommodate their growing family, with Tristan doing much of the construction work himself. Where once Penelope had lived alone in 2 rooms, now a proper ranch house stood with 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a parlor for entertaining the friends who had become part of their lives. Penelope loved watching Tristan with their children. He was patient and playful, teaching them to ride and rope and all the skills they would need to run the ranch someday. But he also emphasized the importance of family, of standing together, of never letting each other face challenges alone. The lessons he taught with words and actions were the same ones he had taught Penelope that day when he rode into her life and changed everything. On their 5th anniversary, Tristan surprised Penelope with a trip to San Antonio, arranging for Martha and the ranch hands to watch the children for a few days. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in proper restaurants, and walked the streets like any other prosperous couple. But Penelope's favorite moment came when they were alone in their hotel room, and Tristan took her in his arms. "You remember what I said to you that first day?" he asked. "When you told me you had been fighting alone." "You said I was never going to fight alone again," Penelope replied, the memory as vivid as if it had happened yesterday rather than 5 years ago. "I meant it then, and I mean it now," Tristan said. "Every day for the rest of our lives, you will have me beside you. In the good times and the hard times, in triumph and struggle, you never have to face anything alone again." Tears filled Penelope's eyes, but they were happy tears. "I know, and I promise you the same. Whatever comes, we face it together." They made love that night with the same passion and tenderness they had shared on their wedding night, their bodies familiar now but no less thrilling. Afterward, holding each other in the darkness, Penelope reflected on how far she had come from the lonely, desperate woman fighting for her survival behind an overturned wagon. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. There were droughts that tested their resources and their resolve. There were illnesses that frightened them and reminded them how precious their time together was. There were market fluctuations that required careful management and difficult decisions. But through it all, they stood together. Tristan never once made Penelope feel like her ideas were less valuable than his, never dismissed her concerns or excluded her from decisions. And Penelope learned to trust completely, to lean on her husband when she needed to accept help without seeing it as weakness. Their children grew into capable, confident young people who understood the value of hard work and family loyalty. Rebecca proved to have her mother's determination and her father's easy way with people. Thomas was quiet but observant, with a gift for seeing solutions others missed. Sarah was adventurous and fearless, keeping her parents on their toes. In 1890, when Penelope turned 34 and Tristan was 36, they stood together watching Rebecca, now 10 years old, help her father work with a new foal in the corral. Thomas and Sarah played nearby, their laughter carrying on the warm spring breeze. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life," Penelope said softly, "that I get to have all this when I came so close to losing everything." "You fought for it," Tristan reminded her. "You never gave up, even when giving up would have been easier. That is why you have it." "We have it," Penelope corrected. "I fought, but you are the one who showed me I did not have to fight alone. That made all the difference." Tristan pulled her close, and she went willingly, still finding the same comfort in his embrace that she had that first day. I love you, Penelope Xavier. I loved you when you were a stubborn woman behind a wagon refusing to surrender, and I love you now as my wife, my partner, the mother of my children. Every day with you is a gift. I love you too, she replied, her heart full to bursting. Thank you for riding into my life. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you for standing beside me when I had forgotten what that felt like. As the sun set over their thriving ranch, painting the Texas sky in brilliant colors, Penelope allowed herself to feel the full weight of her happiness. She had spent so much of her life fighting alone, convinced that was all she could expect. But Tristan had shown her a different way, had proven that partnership and love could make both people stronger rather than weaker. The ranch that had once been her burden was now their shared legacy, something they had built together and would pass on to their children. The loneliness that had defined so much of her early life was now just a memory, replaced by the daily joy of family and partnership. The fights she still faced, because life on a ranch was never easy, were no longer solitary struggles but shared challenges that she and Tristan tackled together. Years later, as Penelope sat on the porch of the ranch house with Tristan beside her, their grandchildren playing in the yard, she thought back to that desperate day when she had hidden behind an overturned wagon with a bullet in her shoulder and no hope in sight. She thought about the tall cowboy who had ridden up and changed everything, who had seen her not as a burden or a problem but as someone worth fighting for. "What are you thinking about?" Tristan asked, taking her hand in his weathered one. They were both older now, their hair touched with gray, their faces lined by years of sun and hard work, but the connection between them was as strong as ever. "About how you saved me," Penelope said simply. "I did not save you. You saved yourself. I just gave you a hand up." "No," she insisted gently. "You did save me, Tristan. Maybe not from the rustlers, though you did that too. But you saved me from a life of loneliness and endless struggle. You showed me that I did not have to carry everything by myself. You gave me partnership and love and a family. You gave me a life worth living." Tristan brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "And you gave me the same. A home, a purpose, someone to stand beside. We saved each other, Penelope. That is what love does." She smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their grandchildren play in the fading light. Rebecca's daughter, named Penelope after her grandmother, was teaching the younger children to rope a practice dummy while Thomas's twin boys housed nearby. Sarah's son, still just a toddler, sat in the dirt making mud pies with serious concentration. This was her legacy, Penelope thought with satisfaction. Not just the land and the cattle and the prosperous ranch, though those things mattered. But this family, this love, this proof that standing together was always stronger than fighting alone. She had learned that lesson the hard way, but she had learned it well, and she had made sure her children and grandchildren learned it too. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Tristan stood and held out his hand to help Penelope up. "Come on, let us get inside. The night air is getting cold." She took his hand, as she had done countless times over the past decades, and let him pull her to her feet. Together they walked into the house they had built, surrounded by family, wrapped in love, living proof that the cowboy had kept his promise all those years ago. She had spent her life fighting alone, but then Tristan Xavier had ridden into her world and told her she was never going to fight alone again. And he had meant it, every single day since. Now, as Penelope looked around at the life they had created together, at the family they had raised, at the ranch they had built from near ruins into something thriving and strong, she knew without doubt that she had everything she had ever wanted and more than she had dared to dream. The fight had not ended completely. Life always brought new challenges, new obstacles to overcome, but she never faced them alone anymore. Tristan was always there beside her, their children were there to support them, and the family they had created formed an unbreakable circle of love and loyalty. That night, lying in bed with Tristan's arms around her, and the sounds of their family settling in for the night echoing through the house, Penelope thought about the girl she had been before him. Alone, desperate, fighting for every scrap of survival with no hope of anything better. Then she thought about the woman she had become, loved and supported and never alone. The transformation was almost miraculous, and it had all started with one cowboy who saw her struggling and decided to help. "I am so grateful for you," she whispered into the darkness. "And I am grateful for you," Tristan whispered back. "Every day, Penelope, every single day." She drifted off to sleep in his arms, surrounded by the home they had built and the family they had created, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she would never face them alone. Tristan would be there, as he had been since that fateful day when he rode into her fight and promised to stand beside her forever. And he had kept that promise, just as she had kept hers to him. Together they had built not just a successful ranch, but a life filled with love, purpose, and the deep satisfaction of true partnership. The lonely fighter who had hidden behind a wagon was gone, replaced by a woman who knew the true strength that came from standing together with someone you loved. As the years continued to pass, the ranch prospered under their joint management. They expanded their holdings, bought additional land, increased their herd. But more important than any financial success was the family they continued to nurture. Their children grew and married, bringing new members into the family. Their grandchildren multiplied, filling the ranch with laughter and energy. Through it all, Penelope and Tristan stood at the center, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They made it a point to never let their children or grandchildren feel alone in their struggles. They offered support and guidance, helping when needed but never taking over, teaching the next generations the same lessons they had learned about the power of partnership. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a celebration that brought together friends and neighbors from all over the county. As Penelope looked around at the gathered crowd, at the ranch that had transformed from struggling to thriving, at the family that had grown from just her and Tristan to include children and grandchildren, and in-laws, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. When it came time for speeches, Tristan stood and raised his glass. 25 years ago, I married the strongest woman I have ever known. Penelope had already survived more than most people face in a lifetime, had already proven she could stand alone against anything. But she gave me the gift of letting me stand beside her, of building something together that neither of us could have built alone. Every day since has been an adventure and a blessing. Then it was Penelope's turn. She stood on slightly shaky legs, emotional from the day and the memories it stirred. I spent the first part of my life believing that strength meant never needing anyone. I thought asking for help was weakness, that standing alone was the only way to survive. Then I met Tristan, who taught me that real strength comes from partnership, from letting someone stand beside you and support you. He promised me I would never have to fight alone again, and he has kept that promise every single day. This ranch, this family, this life we have built together is proof that he was right. We are stronger together than we ever could have been apart. The crowd cheered and raised their glasses, but Penelope only had eyes for Tristan. He came to her side and took her hand, and together they acknowledged the well wishes of their community. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from that chance meeting. As the celebration continued around them, Penelope thought about all the moments that had led to this one. The desperation of that day hiding behind the wagon, the shock of seeing a stranger ride into her fight, the slow building of trust and partnership, the joy of falling in love, the wonder of their wedding day, the birth of each of their children, every triumph and setback they had faced together, all of it had been possible because Tristan kept his promise. She never had to fight alone again, and she never would, not as long as they both lived. That certainty, that security, that knowledge that someone would always stand beside her was the greatest gift she had ever received. It was more valuable than all the cattle in Texas, more precious than all the land they owned, more important than any measure of success or wealth. The night of the anniversary celebration, after all the guests had departed, and the children had settled their own families for the night in various rooms throughout the expanded house, Penelope and Tristan sat together on their porch, as they had done countless times before. "Thank you," Penelope said simply. "For what? For keeping your promise, for standing beside me, for loving me, for giving me all of this." She gestured at the ranch, dark now under the star-filled sky, but they both knew she meant more than just the physical property. "I should be thanking you," Tristan replied. "You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You let me love you even when that was hard for you. You built this life with me. We did it together, Penelope. That is what matters." She leaned into him, and his arm came around her automatically, a gesture so familiar after 25 years that it required no thought. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had ridden past that day, if you had decided my fight was not your concern?" "I do not waste time on what-ifs," Tristan said. "But I will tell you this. I could not have ridden past. Something in me recognized you that day, recognized that you were important, that helping you was what I was supposed to do. Maybe it was fate, maybe it was chance, maybe it was God's plan. I do not know, but I know I made the right choice." "So did I," Penelope agreed. "When I let you help me, when I trusted you, when I opened my heart to you, best decisions I ever made." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly across the sky. Inside the house, their family slept safely, generations connected by love and blood. The ranch around them was quiet, the cattle settled for the night, the horses in their stalls, everything peaceful and secure. This was what they had fought for, Penelope thought. Not just survival, but a life worth living. Not just existence, but true thriving. Not just making it through another day, but building something that would last beyond their lifetimes. And they had done it together, just as Tristan had promised that first day. She had not fought alone, not since he rode into her life and changed everything. Every challenge, every setback, every triumph had been shared between them. The load that had once been hers alone to carry had been divided, making everything more bearable and more meaningful. As they finally stood to go inside, Penelope took one last look at the land that had been her battleground and had become her home. Then she followed Tristan into the house, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring them whatever it would bring, and they would face it side by side. She had spent her life fighting alone, but those days were long past. Now she had Tristan, their children, their grandchildren, and the legacy they were building together. Now she had love and partnership and the deep knowledge that she would never be alone again, and that made all the difference.